Dude named Joel Webbin. I've talked about him a bunch before. He's like a far-right Christian nationalist, like anti-Semitic nutcase, like out of his head. Oh my God, he's crazy. Well, he's got a buddy named Stephen Wolfe. And Stephen Wolfe on the left here, he wrote a book, I think, titled The Case for Christian Nationalism or something. I want to listen to what Stephen Wolfe here has had to say, because he said some absolutely psychotic stuff. And I want to listen to a conversation that he had with Joel Webbin about Jews and everything. It is out of this world. Check this out. This clip is from early December 2024.
There, you are perfectly free in terms of the law to say anything you want in terms of race. But if you say something with race that angers all of society, you lose your job. You never get a job again. You're done. You're through. Your kids will be tarnished. Everything.
Okay, well, let's just kind of frame this up so we understand the example he's giving us. You say something about race, you're free to say that. So if you say that black people are genetically inferior to white people, you can say that without going to jail, but you will possibly lose your job. Okay, yeah, I suppose so. I can say that. You go in and you like say the N-word, then yeah, you might lose your job. Go on.
So there's a social power that suppresses that thing, and Christians are very willing to join in when someone says something racist to exact the social costs involved with that.
So somebody says the N-word, Christians fight against it. All right, I'm with you so far.
They're very willing to participate in that power. What I'm saying is, why not do that to the atheist? Why not do that to someone who is trying to publicly tarnish the name of Christ? Why not do that to someone who is practicing gross impieties?
Why don't we view somebody who doesn't believe the same way as me as people that say the N-word? They're basically the same. Are you kidding me right now? Bro, what is wrong with you? Atheists are not damaging society. Going around using vile language to denigrate and hurt minority groups for the sake of doing it, they are hurting society. I'm not trying to denigrate or hurt anybody for the sake of it. I'm telling you, I don't agree with you. And you are saying, you're basically telling me, you're basically saying the N-word to me right now. Because you're saying you don't believe the same way that I do. You're basically saying the N-word. That's the Christian version of the N-word. I don't believe. That's what he's saying, right?
Why not do that as well? But why not use that power that we already use in society to suppress those things that would be bad? And the end of it would be to normalize Christianity in society such that it is something that people readily accept and through that can be encouraged to have true faith.
Okay, I'm not sure I fully understand. Was he saying that he wants to make it so that people are only Christian?
Such that it is something that people readily accept and
so he wants to modify society so that Christianity is just accepted by everybody
in society to suppress those things that would be bad. And the end of it would be to normalize.
You're right. So what he's saying, he wants to make it impossible for atheists to get jobs or to function in society. They can't rent a house because they're not Christian. I mean, like I said, he wrote a book called, I think, The Case for Christian Nationalism. If you think I'm going too far, I'm not. That is what he actually believes. And I hope I'll prove that to you tonight. Okay, here's another clip from Stephen Wolfe. Just listen to what he has to say here. This one is from late October 2024.
The perfect political covenant would be one that explicitly acknowledges the lordship of Christ, yes. Right? So in a way, any nation can have a legitimate covenant and it order itself according to it, but in order for it to be actually complete and perfected and proper, it would explicitly acknowledge the lordship of Christ.
Yes.
So a country is only valid if it is a Christian nation, then. Is that what he's saying?
And I've said like that. I always say it was a complete mistake that the founders didn't do that. There were objections before it was ratified that they said that yes, it should have, it should acknowledge Christ, and they just didn't want to go back and go through the struggle to produce a new one.
Yeah.
Really? You're trying to tell me you believe that the founding fathers were Christian nationalists, but they forgot to add that bit about this being a Christian nation. Shucks. So they just, people understand. We don't need to add it. No big deal. Everybody knows. That's ridiculous. Are you kidding me? John Adams was a Christian nationalist nutcase, and he was involved in some of the founding stuff. There were multiple drafts of the Constitution, and he kept trying to add in Jesus, and Thomas Jefferson kept saying basically, no, that, like, I put this in here for a reason. Stop trying to add Jesus to this. It is intentionally, specifically, a secular nation. And they kept having to scrap it because the dude kept putting stuff in there about it. So that is one way to interpret that event, I suppose. Anyway, like I said, friends with Joel Webbin. I want to tie Joel Webbin into this because they do an event with each other in a minute. And I want to show you some of the things that they both had to say. Let me just start with Joel Webbin and his, I think this is like the anti-Jew rant that he lays down. It's crazy.
Anybody to hold public office would have to make a Christian profession of faith.
Right.
A Christian profession of faith. So
And not just a 15-minute profession of faith.
Right. And they
profession over time.
And they would have to have a track record of it. That's right.
You know, he's a Christian nationalist, openly self-avowed, and it's describing his perfect government. That is psychotic.
No practicing Jew who hasn't converted to Christianity would be able to serve in public office.
Wow. Okay. Well, I mean, at least he said who hasn't converted to Christianity, because that was really the main difference, I guess, between Joel Webbin and the Nazi government. The Nazi government said even if you had converted, you couldn't be a part of it. So there's that. He's had a lot of stuff to say about, like, Jews for some weird reason, dude. I don't know what his obsession is. Like, I am opposed to what Israel is doing right now and horrified, disgusted by their treatment of Palestine. I am pro-Palestine to the core. But there's a difference between being opposed to Israel's foreign policy and what they're doing right now and being opposed to Jews. Like, that's psychotic, what Joel Webbin lays down. Just listen to this one. This is from early December 2024.
If you are a citizen of Israel and you refuse to convert to Christianity, you're a Jewish citizen, Israeli citizen. I do wish for you not to serve in public office in my nation.
Right.
So no Jews allowed in positions of authority in the country.
Mm-hmm. You can come here if you're going to play nice, like any other immigrant, and contribute. But
you're an immigrant if you're not a Christian nationalist.
But no, you do not get to pull levers of power in my nation's government.
Jesus Christ, dude. Yeah, this guy has a complicated belief system that basically involves removing citizenship from anybody that is not a Christian nationalist, disallowing anybody from being involved in government who is not a Christian nationalist, rewriting the Constitution. He actually has a Christian nationalist constitution. I forget what it's called now, but it's okay, I talked about it a while back. This is it. Again, I covered this on my main channel, I believe. The Statement on Christian Nationalism and the Gospel. Authors, James Silberman, Dusty Devers, who is a Oklahoma state senator, and William Wolfe, the guy we're talking about, Joel Webbin, the other guy we're talking about, Jeff Wright, and Corey Anderson. I don't know those two. I mean, they want to replace the Constitution with this. We affirm that the Bible is God's word, breathed out by him as the only sufficient, certain, inerrant, infallible, necessary, and final authority for all saving knowledge, faith, what we must believe, and obedience, how we must live. We affirm that the light of nature and man and God's work in creation and providence reveal God's power in nature. Anyway, you get the idea. They want to replace the Constitution with this. That is nuts. All right, so let's talk about William Wolfe and Joel Webbin and their weird hatred of Jews. Like, I don't know why they target them so much. It's just odd now. This is Joel Webbin about to speak, and in a second, this in the middle, if you're watching, with the blue jacket on, second from the right, he's that one would be William Wolfe.
And so what I want to do is I want to say, first, the Christian church is God's chosen people. And everything that's not replacement theology, that's a pejorative. This is fulfillment theology. It was always God's plan.
Christian church is God's people. I don't understand. What's replacement theology? Am I missing something? Suppressionism. also called replacement theology and fulfillment theology by its proponents, is the Christian doctrine that the Christian church has superseded the Jewish people, assuming their role as God's people. Right. Okay, yes. This is also Nazi ideology. The Nazis, look, I wrote a whole book about it. Was Hitler an atheist? I talk about the church and Hitler's involvement in it and everything. Amazon and Audible, if you want to find it there. OwenMorgan.com also. Anyway, they created a whole theology. The Nazis did, a Christian theology that they all adhered to. It's called positive Christianity. They call themselves the German Christians. They want to call themselves the Christian nationalists or the Protestant nationalists to exclude Catholics. But Hitler vetoed it and settled on the German Christians. Anyway, they believed that Jews had been abandoned by God after Jesus' death and that Jesus was the linchpin of religion now. And everybody that believes in Jesus and Christianity is now saved by God. Except Jews in the Nazi belief system. Jews could not convert because they had forsaken God, basically. Because they walked away from him when, Jesus died on the stake or whatever. God, the stake. Listen to me, ex-Jehovah's Witness over here. When Jesus died on the cross, it was a cross, actually. It was not a stake. Anyway, that was Nazi theology. It sounds like what he's describing here is just Nazi theology, right? And look, it's fair to argue doctrine. It's fair to say, I think that this thing is correct or that thing is correct. But when just about every theological belief that you have exactly lines up with Nazi Christian ideology, that's kind of weird, right? Is it just me?
And so what I want to do is I want to say, first, the Christian church is God's chosen people. And everything that's not replacement theology, that's a pejorative. This is fulfillment theology. It was always God's plan.
Fascinating.
And Israel, according to the flesh, was warmly invited in upon Christ finishing of that plan. And I, of the persuasion, that a lot of them said yes and actually did come in.
So what is he saying that God told the Jews of the time that they could convert to Christianity, and Joel Webbin believes that many of them did? Here's another thing. The Bible says pretty explicitly that anybody who comes to Jesus will be saved. Anybody. It doesn't say anybody except black people or Egyptians or Jews or whatever. It says anybody. And that was a really inconvenient verse for the German Christians. That was Romans chapter 10. I think verse 2, maybe. Somewhere in that vicinity. It was inconvenient for them. So the German Christians basically just disregarded everything that Paul wrote. And Paul wrote, like, the book of Romans. So that whole thing is out now. They just went with what Jesus wrote, or what Jesus said. In the end, the German Christians had to change very little to adapt the Bible to their belief system. Almost nothing. They just focused more on other verses that other Christian denominations did not focus on as much, for example.
Up to 80-70. I would hold that view. That said, so I want to start there, but secondly, I admit, I do want to go a little bit further, maybe getting a little bit greedy here, but I would also like to say not only is the church God's chosen people, but Israel, not being God's chosen people, are also not even adjacent to God's chosen people. In fact, if anything, Talmudic Judaism is uniquely hostile to Christian faith and to Christ.
This is actually exactly what the Nazis said. This is actually really interesting. Like I said, like the Nazi theology, it actually had some theologically interesting points to make. I'm not opposed to giving up on Paul's writings. I think that's theologically an okay decision to make, because why do I care what Paul wrote? I care what Jesus said. And when Paul contradicts Jesus, I'm going with Jesus, right? So I'm okay with discarding Paul's writings, but a lot of stuff that the Nazi theology adopted was completely baseless and real reaches from a theological perspective. They were really reaching with this stuff. And it feels like that's exactly what's happening with Webbin now.
And I think that that's something to be aware of. And also quit looking at porn, have a good marriage, think about, get your own life together, all of that. So.
When he says have a good marriage, he means you're no longer allowed to get a divorce under any circumstances. His out for people who need to get divorced, there's one reason to get a divorce, and that is because they cheated on you. That's it. And in Joel Webbon's mind, there's a punishment for cheaters, death penalty. So in his ideal world, under his Christian constitution, wherever the hell it went, under his Christian constitution, there would be no divorce, none. The person would be put to death if they cheated, and there's no need for divorce anymore because they're dead. That's psychotic.
If I could, yeah. So
now we're going to get Stephen Wolfe's take on it.
I mean, if we're going to talk about ourselves instead of, the Jews, I think we need to we need to reflect on this idea of Judeo-Christianity or Judeo-Christian worldview or Judeo-Christian whatever.
That term Judeo-Christian, I believe, was kind of invented in like the 1920s to connect Christianity to basically take advantage of the goodwill that Judaism had among certain groups of people, if I remember correctly. Early 19th century, term was first used in a letter by Alexander McCall in 1821 to refer to Jewish converts to Christianity. It was also used in French to refer to early followers of Jesus who wanted to limit the message of Jesus to Jews. 1930s and 40s, the term was used in the U.S. to unite Christians and Jews against fascism and anti-Semitism. It was also used to redefine democracy in response to totalitarianism. The term was first used in print in 1939 by George Orwell in a book review. 1895, Friedrich Nietzsche used the German term Judenchristlich, or something to that effect, in his book The Antichrist to describe the continuity between Jewish and Christian worldviews. So it sounds like the term was invented to fight Nazism, kind of. Well, it was popularized for that reason, it seems like. Okay. Now, what's this guy going to say about this term that was invented to fight Nazis?
Judeo-Christianity or Judeo-Christian worldview or Judeo-Christian whatever, and really eradicate that from our thinking. Because if we say that America is a Judeo-Christian country, then it can't be a Christian country.
Okay, well, I kind of agree with him on this. We should eliminate it. But again, why is he so aligned with Nazi theology? Like, it's weird now, right? It was weird like 2 ideological ideas ago.
Okay, and when we talk about a Judeo-Christian ethic or whatever it is, we're talking it's code for essentially a universalist. It's anyone's in here, anyone if they just abide by these proceduralist or modern liberal rules. That's what it means. And so it's essentially saying any and all come here, nations of the world, we're the whatever. And so we have to get rid of that. And
right, because he doesn't want that, of course. He wants this to be an exclusive country, exclusively devoted to and belonging to Christian nationalists specifically, and only Christian nationalists. Wow, dude.
That, and I mean, I don't want to, I think there's a reason why it's called Judeo-Christian and it's universalist. I won't get into that, but we need to, once we get rid of that, then we can think of, hey, let's have a Christian country. Now, I get the question all the time, like, well, if you want a Christian nation, what are you going to do about the Jews in the country? And I'm thinking, well, they were doing quite fine when we had a Christian country. So, I mean,
well, we didn't have a Christian country. This is not a Christian country. You know what was a Christian country, though? Germany. It was fully Christian, a Christian nationalist state. Like, it was, they were tied. Like, state and church were not separated. So who is he talking about when he says we?
They were doing quite fine when we had a Christian country.
No, they weren't. I don't know what he's talking about.
So, I mean, it's weird. It's not as if they're kicked out or expelled. It's just that this is a Christian country and you are tolerated here. And yet we would not tolerate any action that would undermine that Christian nature of the nation. So,
wow, dude.
So that's how you extend, toleration to non-Christians.
That is wild. So he's explaining that we would tolerate them being here, but we wouldn't tolerate literally anything else about them. Get help, seriously. Oh my God.
But again, this is not simply like a term we use. It's like a state of mind. It's an ideology. It's in our brain. I think it's
what is a Judeo-Christian thing?
In everyone's brain. It's in mine. It's in yours. Everyone. And when you realize that you have that, then you can kick it out. You can suppress it. You can tell your friend, hey, you're thinking wrong. Like your mind's broken. You've been socialized into something that's false.
Okay, wow, that's really interesting. I'll just leave it at that. Again, I don't think that the term Judeo-Christian is useful, and I don't think that we should use it. I don't think I fully agree with his reasoning here at all.
You see, can I ask, clarify that? There's a way in which the rise of the phrase Judeo-Christian was basically an attempt to supplant something like we're a Protestant nation.
It's a subversion.
Okay, now, what? I haven't heard that. What's he talking about?
Was basically an attempt to supplant something like we're a Protestant nation.
It's a subversion. Yeah,
well, why wouldn't they just say a Christian nation instead of Protestant? What are you talking about? What does this mean? Where's he getting this? He's just like making this up on the spot?
A version of Protestant tolerance into a universalistic, non-Christian human tolerance, which is not historically what we've been in this country. Historically, it's been a very tolerant Protestant country.
Right.
But yeah, it's an utter subversion. And so when you think of Judeo-Christian, you're being subverted. So expunge, kill it, destroy it. So that's our critique of ourselves. Anyway, I'll leave that. That's my.
So get rid of Judeo-Christian as a term because we don't want to be tied to Jews anymore. Wow.
I'll just say, like, on that point, I think that's right. I think it is far better to say, because it's what kind of tree did that kind of tolerance grow on? And it was like it grew on a Protestant tree, on an Anglo-Protestant tree. And so you can't cut that root and then substitute a different root and expect to keep the fruit, which is why we don't have that fruit anymore. We don't have a tolerant.
Dude, I am so lost in the analogy now.
We have a very intolerant, oppressive country because it's no longer rooted in something fixed and stable, but that allows for the right kind of diversity or whatever you want to call it, like a pan-Protestantism. So
he's totally lost me. Okay, wow. That was confusing as hell. Anyway, the point is that these people, the Christian nationalists who literally wrote a Christian nationalist constitution, are coming out against Jews in really pointed and weird ways. I don't know. Tell me what you think about it in the comments. Like, these people have problems for real.